English final mixerial one.
Saint Sophia is in Kiev, the oldest standing cathedral in the Soviet Union, symbol of the Ukrainian people and their faith. Today, in the year of the Millennium, 1,000 years of Christianity, it is closed, a museum. The central mosaic, the Virgin Mary, the Aranta. She is known as the indestructible wall, having survived centuries of invasion and persecution. She alone is silent witness to 1,000 years of a nation's struggle for religious freedom. Saint Sophia's is a church of wonder and glory, the envy of all the countries round. For such another cannot be found in the whole world from east to west, said Ilarion, the first metropolitan of Kiev. Adorned with thousands of frescoes, it was built by Grand Prince Yaroslav the Wise in 1037. It was here that monarchs were crowned, histories recorded, libraries established, icons painted. More than a religious center, it holds the political and national aspirations of a people. But the Soviet state will not allow it to function as a church. Historically, it was the heart of religious life in Kievan Rus, the land which is now Ukraine. Kiev, 1,500 years old. Capital of Ukraine, a Soviet republic with a population of 50 million. Dimly existing on the fringes of Western consciousness. Foreign domination, war, forced famine, and hardship has only strengthened Ukrainian national identity, deepened its spiritual roots. But today, only half of Kiev's population claim Ukrainian as their national tongue. The rest, Russian. In the year of the Millennium, in the era of Glasnost, there is new hope. For the first time in years, there is anticipation of a better future. People are once again out in the streets. In the Women's Orthodox Monastery, this community of 100 gentle souls contemplates the glorious event to come. The Millennium is the greatest moment of their lives. As they cleanse themselves in prayer, they clear their garden in preparation. As believers, these female monks, monachini, have suffered horrible losses this century. Before the revolution, 90-year-old Mother Olenka remembers there were 700 novices. Today, there are almost none. The strict life of ritual, servitude, and complete devotion to God has changed little in the past 500 years. Sister Natalka combines prayer and meditation with the making of ornate robes for the Millennium celebrations. For her, as with any religious artist, this is the work of God. 12,000 kilometers away, in Toronto, preparations for the Millennium are also underway. Vladimir Denisenko, a third-generation iconographer, is completing a project that began 3 years ago with empty walls. He is one of 1 million Ukrainian Canadians, and though he has never been to Ukraine, he brings to his work an inherited passion.
I started painting quite early. Already at 14 years of age, I was up at the scaffolding, doing the paintings, the icons, the angels. We are a family of artists. I was starting out like every kid would like to imitate his dad, you know. He was doing paintings and I wanted to get into it too.
This dedication has been passed from father to son. Vladimir's ancestors have adorned churches from Ukraine to South America.
Essentially, I do it because I like it. I love painting. I enjoy the play of colors, but I also love the theology, what it means. It is a return to the sources of church work, iconography. In these icons, I can practice practically everything that I have been learning, and at the same time develop the spiritual aspect. I think that it is exactly the spiritual dimension. It is the spiritual dimension itself which is this challenge, because it is not an easy road to go.
The difficult road was first traveled many centuries ago. Had Vladimir lived in the 8th century, he might have courted persecution and even death for practicing his art. All icons are images of a religious nature. It is an art divinely inspired by prayer, a window into the sacred. Iconography first came to Kievan Rus with Byzantine monks. The Ukrainian school would become world-renowned. For Vladimir, the circle would soon be completed.
I was born already outside of Ukraine, and it would be very special to go back to Kiev, especially in this Millennium year of Christianity and of iconography, the beginning of iconography.
Kiev, city of churches. St. Andrew, Ukraine's patron saint, prophesied, "On the spot a great city shall rise, and God shall build many churches therein." But what sort of churches? What type of religion? According to legend, Prince Volodymyr, a 10th century pagan, sent out emissaries to explore the world's religions. They rejected all but for Greek Byzantine. They took us to the place where they served God, his men reported, and we did not know whether we were in heaven or on earth. Down this cobblestone street 1,000 years ago to the Dnipro River, Prince Volodymyr led his people. As chronicled by Nestor the monk, Prince Volodymyr posted heralds to announce that those who did not become baptized would risk his displeasure. The multitude assembled in the river and cried, "If this were not good, the prince and his nobles would not have accepted it." Priests stood by and offered prayers. There was joy in heaven to behold so many souls saved. Prince Volodymyr ordered the pagan idols to be beaten and thrown into the river. The devil is said to have exclaimed, "Woe is me, how I am driven out hence." And with this, Kievan Rus joined the great Christian nations of the world in 988. And Volodymyr, known as the Golden Sun, founder of the nation, was made a saint. The current of the Dnipro River has not altered in 1,000 years, and neither has the religious devotion of the Ukrainian people. This religion is integral to the Ukrainian identity, the cement of their nationhood. Today, all Ukrainian churches have been taken over by the Russian Orthodox Church, and many have been destroyed. But although the official denomination may have changed, the spiritual essence remains untouched. Under glasnost, the atheistic state has loosened its restrictions on religion. Limited demonstrations of faith are now permitted. But it is still far from the dream Volodymyr envisaged so long ago. Volodymyr's ideal was of an empire that could rival those of Christian Europe. His acceptance of Christianity was a deliberate act, setting a new historical course for his kingdom. Leading historian Mikhailo Brachowski.
Його програма була виконана в основних своїх засадничих.
Volodymyr's program was realized in every aspect. This concerns not only the introduction of Christianity, but also the greater, wider reforms realized by him during this 80-year time span in the 10th century.
Це і адміністративна реформа, це і
These were administrative reforms, military reforms, judicial reforms, and of course, religious reforms which were paramount. All of this was connected to one primary goal.
Saint Sophia, Mother Church of Ukraine, symbolized that goal. To place Kievan Rus alongside the great powers of the civilized world. A century older than the Notre Dame in Paris, the Greek inscription reads, "God is in the midst of Kiev. It will not waver. God will help it from the very sunrise." For Vladimir Denisenko, this is the first place he had to visit. For him, as for Ukrainians then and now, this is the heart of a pilgrimage. It is to Ukrainians what Mecca is to Muslims, Jerusalem to Jews.
I feel a connection to these frescoes, to the work that was done here. I walk these corridors and I feel completely at home. I feel I can understand what they felt, what they thought, what they wanted to pass on to future generations.
The anonymous craftsmen of Saint Sophia built more than a house of prayer. They built a link between the past and the present. Then, as now, in a changing world, the cathedral celebrates what is eternal. Today, even for secular Ukrainians, Saint Sophia stands as a reminder of a glorious past. Art historian Grigory Lokhvin.
For Eastern Slavs, Ukrainians, Belarusians, and later for Great Russians, this was their palace, their shrine. Centered here was the greatest art of that time, icons which have been preserved to this very day. I was fortunate enough in the last 42 years to see these mosaics close up, to actually touch them with my hand. I saw the face of the Virgin, the Oranta, the same as I see you now. It was unbelievable. My heart stood still when I saw the face of the Oranta, the immovable wall. It was the face of a living icon.
By the 11th century, Kiev had become the religious center of Eastern Europe. 800 churches for a population of 100,000. The splendor of monarchy grew. The royal daughters of Kiev married into the ruling houses of Europe. Kievan Rus became a haven for scribes and travelers. Commerce thrived. New ideas flourished. It was a glorious golden age. It was not destined to last. In 1240, the Mongolian hordes could no longer contain their envy. Like a vast wave of fire consuming all in their path, they invaded Kiev. The people resisted valiantly. But in the end, almost everything was destroyed. The Golden Gates of Kiev, the ancient entrance to the city, it stood strong as it has done to this day. Inside the gates, in honor of the Millennium, a play about those ancient heroes is being staged.
Хай вічно живе, хто за Русь православну поліг, та знову біда.
This is not King Lear. The audience is here for more than entertainment. It tells of Prince Yaroslav's resistance to foreign invaders, a theme very much understood both by Canadian Vladimir Denisenko and his Ukrainian contemporaries.
Клянусь, не сханемо воїни, наші священні знамена. За нами наш Київ, на правді мурована Русь.
The City of Churches inspires artists to this day. One is award-winning cinematographer and film director Yuri Ilyenko.
Мені здається, що, скажімо, від тих часів
I believe that what has remained from those old Kievan days is very little and yet
в
substantial.
такому розумінні. Скажімо, та енергія духовності, та сила духовності,
In
та
which way?
енергія
That
творчості, яка
spiritual
була,
strength,
існувала в стародавньому Києві, вона
that
була
strength of
такої сили
creativity, that
зроблена
energy which
людьми,
existed in old Kiev was so strongly formed by the people that it still comes to us through the ages.
великий час до нас ця енергія доходить.
On the surface, Kiev resembles most other European cities. But here there is an undercurrent of tension. In a local cafe, under the stern gaze of the founders of Kiev, students and artists gossip in Russian. Vladimir, the Canadian visitor, tries to make contact in Ukrainian.
Я не думаю, але це...
Glasnost and perestroika promise change, more national independence and identity for Ukraine. But in the Soviet Union, waiting patiently has become a national pastime, and political goodwill, just like coffee, can sometimes run out. In another part of Kiev, a different face of Glasnost. This could be Montmartre or Florence, an artist's quarter. You would not have seen this in Kiev 5 years ago. Gorbachev has permitted a certain controlled openness. There is the beginning of a timid cultural renaissance. But 70 years of Soviet domination casts a shadow of fear, and the broken promises of the past are difficult to forget. Still, there is hope and humor. Ukrainians have not yet lost the ability to laugh at themselves.
Коріння дуже глибинне, і тому саме тисячоліття, яке
Our roots are very deep, and that is why the Millennium, which is taking place in Kiev these days, is important.
тут в Києві святкується. Мені здається, дуже повернуло якось людей.
It is shifting the focus of people to basic aspects of human existence,
Дуже важливих
to its
аспектів людського
spirituality,
існування, до її духовності, до великого ареалу культури, який
to the great culture which was formed here, which we neglected for so long.
які досить ми ганебно забували.
Neglect wasn't always accidental. Kиевская Church was founded in the 12th century. It's one of the fortunate few. Most historic churches in Ukraine have been destroyed, pillaged, or transformed into museums of atheism. On these walls, frescoes made by Mikhail Vrubel, one of the greatest iconographers of the 19th century. His models were real people, living icons. His His genius was unrewarded. He died alone, impoverished, in a mental hospital. Today, Kиївська Church is a concert hall. 9-year-old Stefan has not heard of Rubel, but the man's legacy does not require a signature. The power of these images is greater than the passing of time. Perhaps the fates will be kinder to this young artist. History, its tragedy as well as its triumph, is ever present in Ukraine, always under scrutiny. This archaeological dig is on the site of a 12th century burial ground. Leading archaeologist Petro Tolachko.
Much of what was in Kiev 1,000 years ago has vanished. What remains is the spirit from those old days. After all, only 10 centuries separate us from Kievan Rus.
І кожен із нас в собі несе коріння, які закладалися десь в часи Київської Русі.
And each one of us carries the roots which originated in old Kiev.
Ми бачимо на екрані. І сьогодні
Today there is a renewal of that spirit.
Своєрідне відродження цього духу.
The enthusiasm shown in this market is certainly new. Under Mikhail Gorbachev, the entrepreneurial spirit has been liberated. For the first time in decades, individual effort produces results. But even here, there is no refuge from an inquisitive glance. The average wage is 120 rubles, or $240 monthly. Few can afford strawberries at 10 rubles a pound. Vladimir tries his New World charm. And discovers that the bonds of language and culture are stronger than iron curtains.
Ми поїхали в часі війни, так то було, коли все розпадалось. Дякую вам. Ага, то саме, напевно. Дякую вам.
Monastery of the Caves, Pechurska Lavra, built in the mid-11th century, a jewel in the Orthodox crown. The oldest monastery in the Soviet Union. It would have a troubled history. After the Mongol invasion, the Metropolitan of Kiev fled to Moscow. And by 1685, the Russian Orthodox Church claimed supremacy over Ukrainian Christians and their institutions. The monastery was no exception. But it remained a center of Christianity, a symbol of Ukrainian pride. Pilgrims come from all over the world to this sacred spot. It was the center from which Christianity radiated to the rest of the country. Vladimir must also pay his respects. These caves, built deep in the bowels of the monastery, are known as the region and shadow of death. The first monks lived in these tiny cells. They carved out their beds from the rock itself. The labyrinth of subterranean chapels provided spiritual sustenance. Generations of monks died and were buried here. 122 saints and holy men, Nestor the chronicler, and one woman, Frosia. The dead and the living side by side. Their remains were preserved as mummies by the dry atmosphere and natural environment. An ascetic named John interred himself up to the waist and performed his devotions there until he died. After the revolution, the monastery was closed. For the Millennium, it has been partially reopened and returned to the monks. Western Ukraine, soul of the nation. The journey to Vladimir's family village has begun. Most Canadians of Ukrainian descent can trace their heritage to this region. The least Russified part of Ukraine, predominantly Catholic, it only came under Soviet domination with the infamous Hitler-Stalin Pact. These women remember a time when they owed no allegiance to Moscow. Capital of Western Ukraine, Lviv, a Slavic Vienna, with a population of 1 million. Ukrainian is the language of the streets here. Vladimir can feel at home. A Baroque city bathed in gold. It's been a cultural and educational meeting place for centuries. Watched over by beloved 19th century poet Ivan Franko, who dreamt of a circle of free nations. The Cathedral of St. George, named after the slayer of the dragon. Once the seat of the Ukrainian Catholic Church, it too belongs to Russian Orthodoxy now. There are still dragons to be slain. Today, even Soviet authorities admit to Stalin's crimes. Ironically, it was Stalin, a former seminarian, who devastated the religious life of his country. Ukraine is home to more than half of the churches in the Soviet Union, and hence suffered horribly. Thousands of ancient churches, both Ukrainian Orthodox and Catholic, were destroyed. Monks, priests, bishops, nuns were humiliated, murdered. Entire families of believers were tortured and imprisoned. Sacred icons, revered for centuries, were desecrated. It was the rape of a civilization. Formerly the Catholic Cathedral, this building houses 6,000 icons and religious artifacts salvaged from violated churches. It is now the Museum of Atheism and Religion.
От бачите, румунські, молдавські ви знаєте, а в нас прекрасні ікони, але вони ще не наскільки спопуляризовані, щоб...
Vasil Hlinchak, art historian, gives Vladimir a rare glimpse of treasures the public will never see.
Так, це українська, це десь деяких причин в часи застою.
There will be no exhibit of these icons for the Millennium.
Що вийшов всього-навсього один альбом українських ікон.
The power of the icon lies in its relationship with the viewer. Stored away here like so many old files, they exist between two worlds, one dead, the other powerless to be born.
Тут у нас є такі ікони теж дерев'яні.
For Vladimir, this is a moment of personal fulfillment. He holds in his hands the work of men who preceded him by 300 years.
Навіть в таких цих речах наємне. Ну, а це, я думаю, це...
But they spoke the same language, pursued the same dream, practiced the same art. They reach out through time with a voiceless song.
Це з церков старих. Часом їх уже самі служителі культу усували. Знаєте, все новому часом надають перевагу. Різними шляхами. Але добре, що воно приходить і зберігає.
The Ukrainian icon maintains a separate place in the great family of Byzantine iconography. Vivid in color, symbolic yet subtle.
There are religious artifacts here which belong to the Orthodox Church in Western Ukraine.
Ікони, є тут скульптури, які були в католицьких храмах.
There are also icons and sculptures from Catholic churches.
Робив дуже добру справу
This museum has done a good service because it saves and restores objects marked for destruction, objects which may have been lost or forgotten.
40 years ago, this area was the cutting edge of World War II. It was where the Soviet and Nazi war machines clubbed each other until one could no longer get up. Ukraine, caught in the middle, lost 7 million. It was the last in a series of wars spanning 8 centuries. During this time, Ukraine had known only a few years of real independence. Throughout these turbulent years, only the church remained constant, mother and father of Ukrainian identity. At the core of this faith is baptism, the initiation of a new child into the community. Even though baptisms are not encouraged, and these parents could be prosecuted by the state, it is estimated that in rural Ukraine, over half of the children receive the sacrament, one way or the other. Vladimir's ancestors are from this area. After the service, he shares his work with some local villagers. They will probably never see Toronto, nor the church in which these images were painted. But icons are a spiritual link, a language universally understood.
Свою власну Ну, та ще ні. Я зроблю першу ікону, а тоді сфотографую те, що я зробив.
People gather on a Sunday for their weekly Christian devotion here in Stradich, a village 20 kilometers from Lviv. This is a Russian Orthodox church. For these villagers, it is their only religious and legal option. A handful of Protestant churches are tolerated, but the ancestral, the indigenous churches, the Ukrainian Orthodox and Catholic churches are not. The Ukrainian Orthodox and Catholic churches are the torchbearers of Ukrainian nationalism. Thus, they are a threat. And the monolithic Soviet state does not tolerate threats. This is underground footage, secretly filmed and smuggled out of the Soviet Union. Since 1946, when the Ukrainian Catholic Church was abolished, the state has destroyed and locked thousands of Ukrainian Catholic churches. One single and effective method is to simply remove the roof. In this context, weddings become a symbol of defiance. This couple had to take civil vows first to satisfy government regulation. Their church is still locked. Challenging the local authorities, the wedding party goes to the woods for a surreptitious religious ceremony. Josef Turelya has spent 23 years in Soviet prisons for his beliefs. He is a Ukrainian Catholic activist, a founder of a religious rights movement, and a member of the Helsinki Monitoring Group. He was recently released to the West and now lives in Toronto. But he refuses to give up his fight for the Ukrainian Catholic Church.
Before you, the Constitution of the Soviet Union. Article 52 states that religion cannot be forbidden in the Soviet Union, and that all believers have freedom to practice their religion. On the basis of the Constitution, we demand legalization of the Ukrainian Catholic Church as well as the Ukrainian Autocephalous Orthodox Church.
This photograph of the main KGB prison in Moscow was smuggled to the West. Turelya was imprisoned here, as were many others, for their religious beliefs. All but 3 of these imprisoned Ukrainian Catholic priests are now dead.
Recently,
10,000 Ukrainians signed a petition demanding their own church. The government replied with repressions, destroying and burning our churches. In 1987, 150 Catholic churches were destroyed, burnt, closed, because they had resisted Russian Orthodox appointees in their villages for 40 years.
Почаyev Monastery, the Lourdes of Ukraine. It was Ukrainian Orthodox, then Catholic, now it's Russian Orthodox. Pilgrims still journey here from as far away as Siberia to pay tribute to the Blessed Virgin. One of the miracles of Počajev is this imprint, claimed to have been left by the Virgin Mary in 1240. It is said that she appeared on the rock of Počajev, and from her footstep sprang a miraculous brook. To this day, the holy water is coveted by pilgrims for its curative power. When the Turks invaded, the defenseless people of Počajev turned in desperation towards the miraculous icon of the Mother of God. They were saved. Gratitude is not forgotten. Neither is courage. In Canada, Father Vasil Romanuk is a leading spokesman for the suppressed Ukrainian autocephalous Orthodox Church. Recently released to the West, he spent 16 years in the Soviet Gulag. His wife died while on hunger strike with him.
Ukrainian believers today do not have anything in the church which you could call Ukrainian. For example, in the central cities, particularly in eastern Ukraine, sermons in Ukrainian are forbidden. We do not have a Ukrainian Bible, we do not have enough prayer books, we do not have spiritual schools or seminaries where Ukrainian is used. All this is under the control of the Moscow Patriarch, who deals with Ukrainian Orthodox believers from a position of church imperialism, pure chauvinism.
The extent of Russian influence is evident here in Počajev. Most of these monks are Ukrainian, but Ukrainian Orthodoxy is unacceptable in the Soviet state. Thus, they worship within the Russian Orthodox Church. But even a church of compromise offers comfort to the faithful, and Russian Orthodox clergy have learned to be cautious diplomats. The state will tolerate the church only if the church tolerates the state. The superior of Počajev is Archimandrite Mark. This Ukrainian monk is obliged to listen and listen well to the Patriarch of Moscow.
Перестройка – це дуже важливе явлення в нашому житті.
Perestroika is a very important event in our lives and in the life of our country.
Приймають це відновлення як
Believers accept this rebirth as a personal gift from God during this 1,000-year celebration.
Ніяка сила не може припинити.
No power can stop this process because all the people, the whole country stands behind it.
Якщо є якісь окремі,
If there are some people who do not like it, they are very few.
Це явище, то їх мало.
Думаю, що це поки що ще нічого не засвідчує про справжню демократизацію на
I think this says nothing about real democratization in the Soviet Union and in Ukraine.
Ніякими законодавчими актами гласність не закріплена.
In light of the fact that glasnost has not legally protected any rights.
Щоб можна сказати, що вчорашній, завтрашній день...
Those events which occurred in the past can reoccur tomorrow.
Бо коли люди, котрі вчинили тяжкі злочини,
Because those people who committed crimes against peace and humanity, persecuted others, destroyed churches, sat on trials, controlled concentration camps, still occupy the same positions as they did previously.
не то, що не засуджені, а ніхто з них навіть не віддалений.
Not one of them has been tried or even thrown out of the party.
Місце, котре він займав раніше.
How can we believe that glasnost is something serious? If there is real glasnost, then all of those who were punished and persecuted for their words and thoughts should be rehabilitated. But this is not happening.
Але ж цього нема.
This is Zarvanitya. And like Perchov, this too is a church and a shrine. But this is the illegal Catholic Church, the Church of the Catacombs. The Virgin is said to have appeared in this site as well. And again, water sprang forth. The authorities sealed it with cement, but somehow it seeped through. In the West, Christians often search for a cross to bear. In Soviet Ukraine, these Catholic nuns have never been able to put theirs down. The punishment for participating in a Ukrainian church ceremony ranges from a fine or a loss of job to imprisonment. The church in the village of Stry is a simple one. But for Vladimir, this is the culmination of a journey. The grandfather he never knew painted the icons in this church almost 50 years ago. Here, at last, the circle is complete.
Very strange to be in the village where my grandfather has worked. Since I never met him, I never knew him. But there is this that is left of him. My father worked with his father, just as I worked with my father. It was the same feeling. I sort of said, it's being passed on. For the first time, I had a tangible reality of this passing on. I saw the canvas, I touched it, and it was a very special feeling. I feel completed. I feel like I have touched that which I came here for.
Vladimir came for answers, but what he encountered was the timeless land itself, the land where his parents met, loved, and were married.
This feeling, my parents walking there, my grandparents being there, this whole tie-up, I'm finally connected to this land from where I am.
In these Carpathian mountains, for a moment, questions no longer seem to matter. June 1988, Kiev. St. Volodymyr patiently watches over the multitude gathered to celebrate the baptism he decreed on this site 1,000 years ago. The torrential downpour somehow seems appropriate. the crowds of thousands, believers and non-believers alike, are baptized anew. It's not the first celebration. Moscow took that honor days earlier in an opulent ceremony attended by international church leaders. Ukrainians, Belarusians, and Russians all claim the Millennium as their own. But these resolute people of Kiev believe that the Millennium belongs exclusively to them. Muscovy, later the Russian state, did not exist in 988. As if ordained by Volodymyr, the golden sun bursts forth to greet the procession. This is a time for rejoicing, a time to recall 1,000 years of survival. Metropolitan of Kiev and Galicia, Film.
Тисячоліття хрещення Русі має
The millennium of the baptism of Rus has great significance not only for the Russian Orthodox Church, but also for the entire Christian world. That is why, for our celebrations, which took place June 5th to 16th of this year, there was a gathering of the heads and representatives from the churches of the entire world.
Це спектакль для світу західного.
This is a spectacle for the Western world.
Сенсація, щоб показати, що ніби у нас
Sensationalism to supposedly show that glasnost is taking on concrete forms. There are no concrete forms. This is simply a demonstration for the West, because nothing real has been done. There are no legal documents to support glasnost.
For the thousands gathered here today, this is a moment they have waited for literally all of their lives. They've traveled here from all parts of Ukraine, merely to stand outside St. Volodymyr's Cathedral, site of the Millennium celebrations. Head of the Russian Orthodox Church, Patriarch Pimen, leads the ceremony. Along with his deputy, Filaret, Metropolitan of Kiev and Galicia. It was by invitation only. 500 guests from around the world. All churches were welcomed, except those who so rightly belong, the Ukrainian Orthodox and Ukrainian Catholic.
Це ще раз свідчить про імперіалістичну.
This once again illustrates the imperialistic tendencies of the Moscow Patriarch. That the center be Moscow, not Kiev, so as to belittle the role of Kiev and Rus, Kiev and Ukraine, in this celebration of the Millennium of Christianity.
There are 5 million Catholics in Ukraine, 1/10 of the population. Their celebrations were held underground, behind closed doors, in secret and in danger. There is no pageantry here, no invited guests, just faith. Hundreds of thousands across Ukraine commemorated the Millennium this way. Fellow Ukrainian Catholics around the world celebrated with them. The main ceremony, the public one, was held in Rome, in the presence of the Pope. Inside St. Volodymyr's Cathedral, the Millennium celebrations draw to a close. This is a Russian Orthodox ceremony, but it differs little from that of the Ukrainian Catholic or Ukrainian Orthodox. Yet one is tolerated, the other's not. In reality, the clash between the churches has nothing to do with faith or religion. It is a conflict of culture, language, history, and nationhood. But for these people, who until quite recently would not have made the sign of the cross in public for fear of reprisal, there is tangible hope and, as always, faith. The sermon by Metropolitan Filaret was in Russian. The religious ceremony also had a political agenda. The theme of the religious celebrations was world peace and the implementation of General Secretary Gorbachev's plan for the elimination of global nuclear weapons by the turn of the century. For these people, Glasnost, as much as the Millennium, represents the spirit of resurrection.
We are happy that our celebrations are taking place during this period of perestroika. Perestroika has direct significance for our church. We are opening new churches, new monasteries.
До того часу, поки Совєтський Союз не буде виконувати власну
Until the time the Soviet Union fulfills its constitutional obligations and resolves a coexistence between communists and Christians, there can be no discussion about real glasnost or perestroika. Perestroika and glasnost are possible only when all believers are truly free.
St. Sophia's Museum is closed for the Millennium celebrations. These walls did not hear the sound of a choir, the promises of a better future. The cathedral remains empty, filled only with memories of a glory that once was. A solitary iconographer pays homage for the last time to the icons that have inspired him since childhood.
As an iconographer, especially as an iconographer, this 1,000 years celebration was for me something very special. That I was here, that I participated, that I stood on this ground, that I was in Kiev where the baptism occurred. And to me, yes, I do want to make an icon of it. I want to see it. I want to myself to leave something else, leave something special for perhaps someday someone like me coming 1,000 years afterwards and seeing my work and saying, not bad, he didn't do so bad, did he?
The Millennium celebrations are a symbol of hope for a man and a nation. But how much change will Glasnost bring? Will these corridors be filled again with believers? Will the Orata of St. Sophia, silent witness to 1,000 years of struggle, ever gaze upon the triumph of faith?